First of all, thank you for the welcome. And if you're going to say nice things about my age, you can introduce me all the time. Thank you. Happy All Saints Day. So it's good to be with you today. So self-care, I think you're right, and it's one of these words that you hear out there or people throw around, and we all assume that we know what it is, or we think other people think we know what it should mean. And I think whenever I'm not sure what to do with something, I always break it down into as small pieces as I possibly can. So if I take if I take it in two parts, so self is about us. It's about me. It's about you. It's about all of who I am. So if we take ourselves as created by God, we have a whole bunch of components that are all kind of squished into us. So physical, emotional, spiritual, mental or intellectual. There's also the social piece, the relational piece of who we are. So if we think of all the different parts of who we are, those are all the pieces. It's kind of like a puzzle that puts together the self. That's one piece. The care piece could contain some of the things you mentioned. We'll talk more about that, I think, as we go on. But the care piece is, what is it that we need that will help us sustain us through this day and have us be ready to get out of bed tomorrow to face tomorrow. So I think the care piece is about how do we care and how do we be attentive to those different parts that I just mentioned of how we're made up. I don't know if that helps or confuses, but that's how I think about it. You know, and I think it looks like many different things. I think the more we're aware of who we are and the different parts of who we are and what we need in different aspects of what makes us us, the more options we have, the more tools we have, the more methods we have that can be attentive to how we help sustain and refresh and re-energize ourselves, ready for whatever comes our way, whether it be joyous or challenging.
You describe self-care, it was in the context of, here's my schedule for this week, and on Wednesday, I am going to be taking the afternoon off to enjoy self-care or to employ self-care because I worked on Saturday or whatever. So I thought, well, gosh, what if we have an emergency? How can we function without ways of accessing you? So how do you turn things off and move away from your duties and find someone else to cover or deal with situations where you really are taking care of yourself?
You said I've been doing this for 25 years. So let me just say it's been a journey to get to this point. Because sometimes it does mean saying, you know, I'm sorry, I'm not available. Or I am available, but only under these circumstances. So for instance, you know, this weekend, slight change of plans, but we're meant to be visiting in-laws and then going away for a couple of days. So one of the things that I do, I know that I physically cannot be contacted for at least part of that because my cell phone doesn't work there. It's a case of, okay, so I don't have an option but to find someone who's going to be a point of contact in a work setting, for instance. There are other times that I've had to learn to say, you know what, I I have nothing left to offer today. So I need to go take care of myself so that I can come back tomorrow. Some of it, I mean, a lot of it is just, it's been trial and error, frankly, over the years. There were points where I thought the whole servant ministry piece is we have to be available all times to all people under all circumstances. And I've learned over the years, you just can't do that. It's exhausting. I can't be all things to all people. If I need to be attentive to myself, my energy, my emotional peace, my relationships, then there are times that I need to say no to some things, or I need to say yes in a different way. So there are times, and part of the way that I learned it is because there are times where I just would be completely exhausted and I would get sick. And I went, oh, wait, there's a pattern here. So this isn't working, so I need to try something different. And I would try something different and it would work for a while, and then something else would come up and it wouldn't work. So the whole self-care piece, which includes but isn't limited to saying no, it's really been it really has been a journey. It's a learning curve as we go. I think for the self-care piece, I think there's times that we just let it go. I let it go. I forget about it. And then I find myself going, why am I tired? Why am I exhausted? Why am I irritable? Why don't I want to do the things I normally want to do? And so for me, there are some clues or I've learned there are some clues that I know when I need to be attentive to some part of me. So if I'm conscious, or I use the phrase, I'm tired. If I use that a lot, it's telling me something. If I notice that I'm more irritable than usual, then I know I need to pay attention. If I dream a lot more, for me, that means I have a lot going on in my life. I need to be paying attention. I have a little, when I'm feeling stressed, I have a little twitch in one of my eyes, and no one ever notices it, but I notice it. And for me, I learned this a long time, but like 30 years ago or 35 years ago. And I always know whenever that shows up, it's because, okay, I need to be paying attention to taking care of myself. So there's little things that we have of how we respond to things, or how our body gives us clues that shows us, oh, I need to be paying some attention. I need to be starting to think about how I take care of that in a way that allows me to recapture the energy or the enjoyment or the refreshment that allows me to do what I do. So, I mean, Anne, you mentioned I talk about self-care when chaplains are coming in, and it's something that I talk about at various points along the way, because chaplains hear a lot from people about suffering, about pain, sometimes about tragedy. You're hearing a lot of very emotional pieces from patients or families, and sometimes staff. And there's only so much that any one of us can carry by ourselves. So the only way that we can come back the next day or the next week or the next month or the next year to have any ongoing sense of sustainability. We need to be attentive to what do we do with all of those feelings and all of those things that we hear about, because they do impact us. And I think I want to come back to talk about 2020. I know that many of us would like just to forget about 2020, but I want to talk a little bit about it because I think it, for me, really brought back again how important it is to be attentive to our own well-being. Because I've been doing this for 25 years. I've worked in level 1 trauma hospitals and seen a whole bunch of stuff that no one really ever wants to see. I think I'm fairly good at self-care. And I will tell you, it's taken me a long time to get to be able to say that. And this year, round about March into April, I went, oh, yeah, I thought I was good at this self-care piece, but you know what? I really need to up my game here because this is a particularly challenging time. So I think this has been a year for many people, maybe many of you as well, where there has been a lot happening. We've had lots of, so I'll talk about some things that happened for me. One of it was all the volunteers were sent home because they are not currently allowed to be in the hospital with the COVID situation. So then as a department, we had to kind of reinvent what that looked like. That kind of was stressful. It also meant that there was a lot of loss for me, but also for the volunteers. But for I'll just talk about me. You know, I'm used to having people there. I'm used to having those connections, those conversations, those discussions, those reflections, and that was gone. And we had to reinvent everything, how we're going to do it. I had a spring of that was filled with travel. Some of it was vacation, some of it was to go see friends, some of it was to see family, some of it was for education. Piece by piece by piece, all gone. Didn't even transfer to Zoom because there wasn't enough time to do any of that for some of it. All gone, off the calendar. Things that I normally like to do, we couldn't really travel all that far. All gone. So there was just a whole bunch of losses that were happening, and I'm sure it's true for many of you as well. All of your plans all changed. Now, those losses are nothing compared to what some people were dealing with. Right? People lost a whole lot more than just travel and time with friends, but it's a loss. There was limits to what we could do and where we could go for a while. So that really has changed what to do. And the hospital was very stressful, and community was very stressful. Everyone was trying to figure out what they could do, and it was stressful even just to go to the store. And all the normal things that we do, as simple as going to the grocery store, just required a whole lot more thinking of, well, when can I go? What's a good time to go? When there's going to be less people there? What do I need to wear in terms of a mask? What do I need to take in terms of hand sanitizer? Where can I park best that I'm not going to be around too many people? Which way am I meant to walk down this aisle? What do I do when I get to checkout? Any of that stuff, a simple shopping trip just took a whole lot more thinking. So I think it was a whole lot more stressful. And then, of course, we're in an election year. It's been different and challenging in its own way. It's been stressful. All of those things, plus the normal things of life, those can be really exhausting. So, so I realized in the spring that a lot of the stuff that I normally would do it just wasn't working for me. So I really needed to think about, okay, how do I reinvent how I take care of myself? Because this is a longer term piece. It's not, any of us can get through a crisis for 2 weeks. We can do it, right? Short term, we make it work. We focus what we need to do. We get through it. We move on. Things return to normal. This is different this year. And certainly for me, as someone who thinks I do self-care well, I really, really had to reinvent what that looked like. So there was one day at work where there was things happening in the hospital that required me to provide extra care within the organization. And on the second day, around about lunchtime, I called my boss and I said, okay, I have one more person I need to go see. Then I've done what I need to do. I'm going home. And the reason I'm going home is because if you want me to come back tomorrow, I need to go and be attentive to myself so that I can come back and be attentive to other people. And bless his heart, he said, great, want you back tomorrow? It's fine, off you go. Okay, so, but there's times we can't just take half a day off now and again just because, right? We can't. Not on any regular basis if we want to keep our job. But there's other ways we can do it. You know, self-care doesn't always mean you have to take a week of vacation or go away for a weekend or take half a day off work. It doesn't require that. One of the things that I do, and I still do, I started a while ago in a previous job, is I started tea at 3. And it was a 5-10 minute break where, you know, a few of the chaplains would come back to the office. We would have tea or coffee or whatever they wanted, or even just, you know, we had 10 minutes basically where all we did was we talked to each other, we talked about our day, we supported each other, and then we went back to do what we were going to go do. So it looks like a variety of different things, but again, this year has really forced me to think a lot more about what this means for me, and I suspect it means a lot more for all of us. So I can keep talking here, but I don't know if you've a different question.
Well, I would just say that for the volunteer chaplains, you have helped us through the process of figuring out how we can do as much of what we have done before in a completely different way. We can only talk to patients or their families by phone. That's a whole other set of challenges. You have no visual cues. You don't know if that person is lying comfortably or, you know, filled with anxiety. You only have their voice. And we have adapted to that. And I thank you, because we have to acknowledge our limitations, but still do what we can. Yeah. And I think also the support of, we have a weekly informal call that people can call into if they want to just decompress or share issues or ask for advice. So those are elements of self-care, as well as sharing the burden with other people who understand better than anyone else exactly what you're going through. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point, because we talk about self-care, and there is a piece in which, you know, only I am responsible for my care. I mean, other people can care about me, but only I am responsible for taking care of myself.
Right.
You know, if I know something is good for me and I don't do it, that's on me. I can't expect Anne to call me up and say, William, are you doing this and this and this? And that is not going to work. However, what I will say, and I think your comment pointed to this, Anne, there are ways that we can be connected to other people with a common purpose that can be supportive and encouraging and affirmative. So for instance, those weekly calls with the other chaplains, for those who want to come, that's great. It's a place to connect. It's a place to know that you're all going through the same stuff. It's a place of mutual support. So other people can be our allies in what we do. And I think I'm going to I want to break it down a little bit more about how we start to think about self-care. But I think one of the pieces is for different parts of our life, we have allies, we have friends who are there, maybe who have similar goals or interests or cares, and we can invite them to be our allies or our advocates, or they can be our support team while they're not responsible for us. Okay.
Right.
So there's a question in the chat. So I kind of I want to go that direction. So with others, we notice that another person is reaching the end of their rope. I'm wondering if we should then realize that we ourselves are probably in the same situation. Again, one can go back to COVID perhaps. People often are spending a whole lot more time either by themselves or with someone else, sharing space with someone else that maybe they're sharing a lot more time together than normal. So I think there are times that we do see other people really struggling. I think we recognize changes in someone else's behavior. I think there are times that that gives us clues. We can't always fix it for the other person, but we can sometimes. Sometimes we don't always notice in ourselves. I might not always notice when I have a little edge to my voice. I might not always notice when I'm constantly saying, you know what, I'm just tired. I'm just tired. But other people notice it. So if they have permission to say something, that gives us clues. If we see other people who are at the end of their rope, I think it does give us pause and go, okay, so they're struggling. How am I doing? What do I need to do? Am I in the same boat, or am I actually doing better than that? But it does make us think about where am I in this situation too? And the more that we're able to be in a good position ourselves because we're taking care of ourselves, we're attentive to our needs, then, so there's a cat in the way here. Here we go, all the way over, thank you. Then pets can be part of self-care, it's wonderful. Then I think when we're in a better position, then we're in a better position to be supportive to someone else. Okay. We can't help anyone be better than we ourselves are. Okay.
A question also that has to do with best practices for practicing self-care. Are there some universal practices you can recommend, or are these individually different for each person, or how would you respond to that?
It's a great question, and the answer is yes. There are some general ones, and for the most part, excuse me. Hello. Oh, there we go. And there are some that I could give you a list of things that would be good to try. But I want to go back to, I'm going to answer this question in a kind of slightly roundabout way. What I've noticed for myself is over the years, I will find things that work for me. So I will find journaling works, I will find that exercise works, I will find that meditation or yoga work, I will find things that work for me. And then life changes, situations change, I change, and those things that worked for me don't work anymore. So then I need to go back and think, well, okay, so what do I need to do that will serve me? So let me tell you how I think about this for myself, if I may, with the point I'm going to ask you as you hear me talk. Think about this for yourself. Okay. So I want to go back to those different parts. So, so back to spring. Okay. What I was doing wasn't working for me. So then I had to go, okay, so physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, social, which pieces is it that I need? Which pieces of my circle that makes me the whole that I am, which pieces here are not working? Or which ones are not working as well as I would like them to work? Okay. So I kind of have a circle. I put those different parts of who I am in it, and I go, okay, so which pieces of this would give me more fulfillment? Which do I need to help me going, to keep me going? So I looked at that, and one of the first things I had to go think about was, okay, what is it I need to let go of? There are lots of things, put it back in the spring, that were outside of my control. I can't make this virus go away. I can't stop the lockdown. I can't stop things being canceled. But what can I do? Look at these areas for me. What can I do? So for me, it's a case of, okay, so church is looking very different these days. So where else do I find that spiritual peace for myself? And for me, the spiritual peace is connection to nature. That's where I look. That's what refreshes me. It's where I feel I'm conscious I'm saying this to another church group, but I find God sometimes more in nature than I do in other places. So for me, that's where I look. Okay, so then the question is, how then do I find that in ways that I'm allowed to do right now? Okay, so I can go for a walk. I live in a neighborhood that's got lots of trees. Is it the middle of the countryside? No, it's not. But I have lots of trees. There's lots of greenery. There's, some nice gardens. So it's a case of, okay, so I'm going to spend more time outdoors. Okay, being socially distant, masked, all that, but I still can be outdoors and think about where am I seeing the beauty of nature and how does that connect me spiritually. I also know that I cope better when I'm able to exercise. Don't like doing it, but I know it's good for me. So, so I wasn't going to go to the gym. Still not going to go to the gym. Might be a while before I go to the gym. So how else can I do it? Okay, so for me, I also like to bike. So I did a little bit of that this summer. I started, I'm not really a runner, but I started doing some running outdoors. On the days when I didn't have the energy or the time to do that, it's a case of, okay, every night after dinner, we're going to go for a half hour, 45-minute walk. Okay. Those are the pieces where I can say, okay, I need to be thinking about what's going on for it. I have to be more, I have to make myself a little more conscious of what I'm feeling. So one of the ways it works for me is I went back to journaling. And journaling isn't just facts that happen, but how am I feeling about stuff? And I can truly vent in my journal because no one else is going to see it or read it. So I started to think about those different pieces of my life and how do I find pieces that fit in there. And yes, there were some evenings I would come home and because, you know what, I want to sit and watch Netflix for the evening. Okay. Which is fine, it's great, absolutely. It's one more tool. But if that's the only tool, if every night I come home and only sit and watch Netflix, or if I only come home every night and I only eat chocolate, or if I come home and I only drink wine, those are all very limited pieces. And short term, those are great. They can be great. Longer term, not so much. So we need to think about short term, longer term within each piece of the life that makes us up. So that's where I go. So when I'm noticing that I'm being more impatient, or I'm dreaming more, or my eyes acting up, or you know, I'm just dealing with loss, I'm gonna go, okay, so where do I need to look? Which part of my life is it that isn't working, and what do I have some control over? So it's a conscious choice. It's a very conscious choice. I also say that this spring, I am, for those who know a little bit about Myers-Briggs, I'm an introvert. I like people. I spend most of my day normally with lots of people, and I love it. And that tires me out. It tires me out. So normally, as part of my self-care, is some time alone. This spring gave me lots of time alone because we couldn't be social. And I realized, you know what? Yeah, I'm an introvert, but I need some connection. And I reached out in a few different directions. I reached out to former colleagues. I wanted to know how they were doing. But I also wanted, it was a place of connection, a place of people I know and trust. It was a place of connection and support, and a friendly face. I didn't have to work too hard to build that relationship because it was already there. So I reached out a lot more than I have in years. I also reached out to old friends that maybe I haven't had all that much connection with in years, because I knew I needed that piece. One of the things my husband and I have done this year is our condo building. Out the front, we have a lawn, and we've done social distance picnics, which are wonderful. So we could be outdoors, we could be 6 feet apart, everyone brings their own stuff. It was wonderful because we didn't even have to clean our apartment because no one was going to be in it. It's wonderful. So it's about how do you individually think about which part of your life needs some attention or support or gentleness. And what does that look like for you? So I can talk about a number of pieces, but it's all going to be very specific to you and what you just be aware of, what works today for you might not work next week or next month or in 3 months' time. You might need something a little bit different. But so if you think, so let's break it down into a few pieces. So if you think about the physical, what is it you need? Is it exercise? Is it stretching? Is it walk? Is it what? What does exercise look like for you in a way that is manageable? Okay. And here's the piece, because sometimes we there's reasons that we don't do good self-care. There's reasons for that we tell ourselves. Sometimes we think, oh, it's not that important, or it takes too much time, or it's too much work, or I can't do that. You know, I can't run for half an hour. Great. Can you walk for 5 minutes? Do that instead, or at least start there. We tell ourselves it's not worth it. I'm not worth it. You are. You are. If we go back to that spiritual piece and we are created by God, you're worth it. You're worth taking some time, some effort for yourself. And not only can it make you feel better, but it also has you be in a better position where then you're able to be of support to someone else. So the physical piece, so it could be exercise, but it could also be, when we came on, you're talking about the food pantry. Great. Are there physical things that you can do that would help contribute to the food pantry, for instance? You know, instead of driving right to the door, could you park a little further away and take 2 or 3 trips back and forth from your car to the door? It's another piece. So how do you take care of yourself physically? Again, it's not about running a marathon. It might simply be that you start with a 5-minute walk around your neighborhood, or half an hour, whatever time you got. It doesn't need to take all day. It might be, the other physical piece is sometimes you just need to rest. Are you getting sleep? Are you going to bed half an hour earlier? Are you allowing yourself to rest? Will you have an evening where you watch Netflix, maybe not for 6 hours, but where you watch it for an hour just to switch off? Again, your body's resting. Spiritually, church group, what does spiritual look like for you? Okay, given there's limits to what you can do in terms of in person. I know you're doing some outdoor pieces, but it's still different. How can you find, where else in your life do you find that spiritual peace? For me, I'm going to spend time outdoors, even if it's cool this winter. I'm going to bundle up and I'm going to be outdoors because that's where I connect. Or can you go for a drive in the country? Even sometimes just to see it. I grew up in a small town back in Scotland, and I miss sheep. I do. I miss cows. So if I drive out into the country and I see cows, you've no idea how happy that makes me. It's just to go, oh, yeah, that just connects me to my roots. But for you, it could be something else. It might be gardening. It might be, and if you don't have a garden, it might be you have a potted plant. Sometimes repotting a plant, just getting your hands dirty in the soil is just a reconnection to nature. But for you, it could be something else. I mean, it could be digging out one of your prayer books. It could be finding a hymn on YouTube, one of your favorite hymns, and listening to it. It could be a whole variety of things. It could be a little prayer group you have in your church. It could be, I know there's people who do oh gosh, what's the name of it? Lectio Divina, who use scripture just as a prayerful reflection piece. Again, any of that could be 2 minutes, could be 3 hours, depends on what time you got. The intellectual piece, you know, no matter how up to date we are with all the stuff that's on the news and on the media and Facebook and everything else, sometimes we need just to switch off and focus on something else entirely. Okay, so you know, this spring, I was reading a book about the history of Casablanca during World War II. The city, not the movie. Although I love the movie, but again, very different. And I was reading stuff about World War II and Churchill. Now, that's not everyone's cup of tea, and you might not think that's fun, but it helps disconnect from all of the anxiety about today into history's a little bit more removed. It's a little bit more, it doesn't necessarily stir up some of the same emotional need, okay? Or you go read a novel. That's one of my mental breaks when I want to switch off. So I'm always happy when one of my favorite authors has a new book coming out, because it makes me very excited that I get to switch off for a few evenings while I read this book. There's the social piece. We can't all be together. We can't all gather in the same room. We can't all get to work and be in the office. We can't all do that. What can we do? Zoom works, but what works for you? You know, is it a Zoom? Is it a phone call? Is it, you know, no, not today, but on a nice day when it's pleasant, can you find a friend who maybe lives near you or can drive to you, and you can walk a few feet apart with your masks on, but it's a chance to be together. Can you do that? Is that something, again, it all depends on your comfort level of what you think is smart or wise. There's people, again, so if we look at a whole variety of pieces, there's people who do yoga, mindfulness, meditation. There's people who have hobbies. I haven't done it this year, but I like photography. That for me, that's one of my ways that I switch off, and usually a lot of my pictures are kind of more nature. So again, it gets me in nature. What's your hobby? Can you do that right now? If you're spending a lot of time indoors, there's outdoors. What does that offer you? There's people who will go, you know what? I'm going to use this time I'm going to take an online Spanish course. There's some free apps out there. If you want to learn anything, there's an app for it. All right? Spanish, French, Italian, how to knit, whatever it happens to be, there's apps out there that will do it. So what is a hobby or an activity that you enjoy that allows you just to switch off? Even if it's 10 minutes. What allows you to do that so that when you come back, you're more refreshed? So there's a whole variety of things that people do. I think in terms of best practices, I don't think it's the activity. I think it's what it achieves. And to do self-care, we need sometimes to switch off the piece that is stressful for us, to do something that sometimes is just absolutely mindless. Okay. So Friday, is it Friday? Yes. I haven't polished my car in years, right? I always take it somewhere and someone else does it for me. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to go polish my car. And I had forgotten how mindless it is. And it took me half an hour. That's all it took me, was half an hour. And it allowed me half an hour to switch off. Okay. Now, please do not bring your car over, because I'm not going to do it. But it's one more way of what works for you when you want to switch off. What do you do? Switching off is fine, or switching to something entirely different that uses your body differently, that uses your mind differently, that takes you away from the stress or the anxiety or the worry of this thing, which probably right now you can't change all that much. To focus on something, you go, oh, I can learn something, I can do something, I can stretch, I can, you know, I'm gonna go to the store and just pick up one of my favorite treats, but I'm gonna walk to it and walk back. So there's a variety of things. So I journal, because that's one way that Mr. Introvert over here gets some of his thoughts out. So that helps me process, and that also helps me think about what is it that is missing right now that I maybe can work on. All right, I'm going to stop there.
I want to ask a question that you might either not want to answer or not feel qualified to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And that is, why do some people, and I will include myself in that group, have so much difficulty saying no to things that people ask you to do? When I find that I start by saying no, and then I say problem. No problem. I can do that. Why? What motivates people to want to be pleasing to others, or take on tasks they really don't want to take on, or agree to things that they know they should not be agreeing to? Do you have a view on that?
I have opinions about many things, but like many things when it involves people, I think it depends. It depends. I think there are times, and I grew up, you know, where you didn't say no. If someone asked you a favor, you did it. That was it. End of story. So some of it is maybe cultural. Some of it is family of origin. Some of it is we want to be liked. Some of it is even from our faith. If we are good Christians, then we go the extra mile. If we you know, if we want people to like us, or if we want people to be our friend, then we have to do this. Or, you know, we're afraid that we're going to make them upset. So I think there's a whole variety of pieces, and it takes me back. Sometimes we just need to say no, as Tracy mentioned, and it's okay. It really is okay. We're not going to necessarily break the other person. We're just saying no. And June, what I'm hearing is, no, I can't do that, but here's what I can do. And I think sometimes that for those of us who struggle to say, no, I won't do that, there is another piece in which we can say, no, I won't do that, but here's what I am willing to offer, that I'm genuinely willing to offer. So I think there's almost a counter offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's all very, very true. I think the whole no piece, I think is a culturally ingrained piece for most of us, and I think you know, I think most of us want to be nice people. We genuinely want to be helpful. We genuinely care, and we want to help other people who are in a fix. And there's some things there's some things we absolutely have to say yes to. If someone shows up at my door and, you know, they've had an accident, they really need someone to call for an ambulance or get them to the hospital, of course we're going to say yes. We're not going to go, oh, I'm sorry. We're not going to do that, but we're going to tend to them. We're going to make sure that they're safe. that they get the help that they need. But most other no's, you know, the other person, they're going to survive. We're not going to damage them. We're not going to break them. And it might give them opportunities, as June said, it might give them opportunities to not always go for the easy answer because, oh, June always says yes. It might be that they actually find a more appropriate person who's going to do that. I think if you want to practice saying no, don't go for the biggest, scariest no. If someone asks you, don't do that. Go for one where there's not a whole lot at stake. So if someone says, would you go to the store for me in half an hour and pick up, my chocolate? Will you go pick it up and bring it back for me? They're probably going to last more than half an hour without their chocolate. So can you say, well, except me, but can you say, no, I really can't do that right now. I could go this afternoon for you. Would that work? So a counter offer, as June said, or you could go, there could be a different kind of offer that comes up of, would you like to, back when we can actually do things, someone says, I have a spare ticket. Would you like to go to the opera with me? And if you hate opera, you might want to go, oh, sure. Yeah, sure. Of course. Yeah, I'll go. If you're stuck, I'll go. That you could say, it's really not my thing. So I'm gonna decline the offer. I'm gonna say no. They will find someone else, or at the very worst, nothing really horrible has happened. So find somewhere where there's not a whole lot at stake and say no. And then you can work your way up to some of those harder no's. You're absolutely right. And it's about being present in the moment, which is what most of us, ideally strive to do. But it's just really hard when the rest of life is filled with things we need to do or things that we're worried about. So yeah, we've lived in this neighborhood for 10 years, and I will tell you this spring, because we forced ourselves to go for more walks, we have discovered neighborhoods we had no idea. And we saw things about, around some homes or gardens that I've driven past, but I wasn't paying attention because I was so busy where I was trying to get to. But when I walk past it, I go, oh, this is absolutely gorgeous. And you spend time just looking at the garden, or you see something on the house, or you discover, oh, I never knew that actually there was a house here. Look. So again, it's about being in that moment and just being there. And what you find is when you come back, your brain is kind of refocused. Instead of being scattered, it's a little bit more focused. So when you do come back to work on something, you're a little more focused. It's easier to do. And I honestly, I think people boast about how well they can multitask. It's just, I think it's really overrated. It really is. And maybe I'm just saying as I get a little bit older, it's a little bit harder to do. But when I multitask, I tend not to be particularly good at anything I've done. I work best when I have one project in front of me and I can focus on it, and then complete, or move to the next phase, move to the next project. If I try and do a few things, particularly this year, I'm finding I'm just a whole lot more distracted. And when I'm distracted and trying to work on a whole variety of things, nothing happens. And then I just get really tired because I haven't really accomplished anything, but I've worked hard. So I think I'm a great proponent of unitasking. Whereas I sometimes will do something, even if it's a relatively small thing, because I know that thing I can finish. and then I have a sense of accomplishment, and then I'll move on to something else that at least I can move it forward. I might not finish it, but I can move it forward. And I think that also ties back to Anne's question of why people don't, well, it wasn't Anne's question, but why people don't always do self-care is because sometimes it all seems overwhelming. I think when we break it down into one piece or one thing that we can go do, then it makes it easier. So if I say, you know what, my brain is really scattered here, I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk. Okay, go find my mask, go for my 10-minute walk, come back. Then I'm really, it's a case of, okay, I've taken care of myself in as much as I've helped my brain refocus a little bit. I've had a chance to let some stuff go, and I come back and refocus.
Is self-care just one of those other to-do things that I put on my list, and it becomes a burden because I have to think, did I do my self-care today? In my overscheduled life, did I set a time for this? And now that I didn't, I feel guilty and so on. Does that...
I think there's a great danger of saying, oh, I need to do this and this and this and this. And if the self-care piece is adding one more thing to that, that kind of undermines the intent behind it. So, sometimes the self-care requires saying no to something else. So I think there's two pieces. There's one, are the things we want to add? Maybe. But the other piece also is, are the things we want to drop off that no longer serve us? I find these days that reading the newspaper in great detail, as I used to do, doesn't really help me anymore. Can't imagine why. So I will look at enough of it. I have a little sense of what's happening, and then I will flip to the comic pages, and I will read those. So I think there's a piece in which are the things we want to let go of, because that's the other piece of self-care. Are there ways we can allow ourselves some grace to let stuff go? Do the stuff that is on our to-do list, does it need to happen, or does it need to happen differently? And are there other things that I want to add that would feed me as opposed to drain me? So occasionally you might have to add something on, but you add it because it's something that feeds you and nourishes you and refreshes you. And then you can come back to the other to-do list. So I think it really, there's pieces that I've had to look at for myself and go, you know what, right now, that's not important. So I need to let that piece go. And if I let it go, there's a good chance maybe either someone else will pick that up, or maybe it's not that important. But if you just add and add and add and add, then all you do is you create this huge long list that doesn't really feed you. It just drains you even more. So you really need to balance those pieces out. Someone said, if I only do all the little tasks, at the end of the day, I've avoided the big ones. Yeah, guilty. There are times when I go, okay, I'm going to do all these little ones, and then I can focus on the big one, but then I don't have time or energy for the big one. So sometimes I flip them around. So sometimes it's more about, I just need to do this to get out of the way. you know. So there's one day at work this week, I went, okay, so here's a project that I need to work on. It takes me a little while. I've been putting it off. But I've been thinking about the fact that I've been putting it off. And then I think more about the fact I put it off, and then I worry about putting it off. And then tomorrow I have the same thing about putting it off. So sometimes it's just, you know, if it's already sucking all my energy and my thought, why don't I just do it and it's done? And, you know, sometimes it's like polishing the car. It doesn't always take as long as we think it's going to take. It's not always as horrible as we think it's going to be. I think it's, you know, sometimes when you think about where is our energy going and how do we want to use it. So it's not always about how do we manage our time, but how do we manage our energy? How do we want to use our energy, and how do we want to recharge our energy? Okay. So I don't, you know, when I'm doing some photography stuff, I don't always have the time to go do it, but if I go do it, it doesn't take all that long, and sometimes it's just so much fun and so refreshing that I'm geared up for the rest of the day or the weekend. There are no magic answers to self-care. It's a work in progress. It will always be a work in progress, and that's okay. If you think, you know, there is an end goal in self-care and I'm going to work really hard towards it, then it just becomes another task. But if the self-care is part of the journey of the rest of your life, then it's not about getting there, but it's about being intentional and reflective about what you need in terms of your energy, in terms of your sustainability, so that you can come back and you can do all the stuff you love doing and some of the stuff you don't love doing tomorrow.
We are at the end of our time allotted for this morning, that I want to, I think, represent all of us in thanking you, William, for your calm, kind, reasonable approach to this. It's been, first of all, interesting and helpful. And you have the gift of talking in the right way to the right audience. And your talk about spirituality, your talk about finding it in nature, your talk about rewarding yourself, and talking about letting things go are all extremely helpful to us. So thank you very much.
I appreciate the invitation, so thank you.
Yeah.